Welcome to Whistleblowers in partnership with Wix Trade Pro. Coming up.
There aren't many professional footballers out there who play regularly free of pain. It absolutely ruins them.
You miss a penalty again and you're thinking, what's going wrong? And the abuse you would take, it used to affect me a lot. I had to tell me postman to stop delivering me mail with just me name on. There was just lots of abuse.
You've got to know your audience, you've got to know your fan base. And talking in airport management Bible book speak is a disaster. A warm welcome to Whistleblowers, the podcast. I'm Gordon Smart, the B-Tech, Gabby Logan, and as tradition dictates, I'm joined by the one and only referee, the man in the middle, Mark Clattenburg, and a man dressing far younger than he actually is, Ian Ladyman, in his brand new New Balance trainers that just about survived a wall building challenge last week. Now, Ian, are your trainers okay? We need to make sure. I've been worried about them all week.
The trainers are good. I got the concrete off. Gordon's referring to a little challenge we did last week, building a wall for Wix, which will be coming to a trailer near you pretty soon. I take offence to that when you say I'm dressed like a younger. I mean, what should I wear? What does a 56-year-old wear? What do you want to see me?
What is it? An All Saints hoodie?
This is an old. It's got a hole in the elbow. It's an old All Saints hoodie. What do you want me to?
All of your clothes have holes in them.
What do you
the
want
moths
me to?
Have been at you.
What do you want me to rock up in next week? Another sensible John Lewis sweater.
Ian, you work at the Daily Mail. I think you should wear a bowler hat, come in with a briefcase, an umbrella, a pair of brogues, a Windsor knot, all of that stuff. I think it'd be appropriate.
Umbrella with a bit of poison on the tip. That is what I'll do. I'm uncomfortable, by the way, you referring to yourself as Gabby Logan. Gabby Logan keeps talking about a sex life incessantly at the moment. You're not going to do that, are you? We don't have to listen to you. Don't have to get that from you.
It'd be the shortest podcast in history, lads. Do you know, I was having a wee laugh when we started today because there was a bit of an echo, but actually it's not a real echo, it's just the emptiness of Mark Clattenburg's head after a weekend in Dublin drinking Guinness. His brain had shriveled to half the size.
I have to say, people say to me, you know, Guinness in Dublin, you can get it just as good everywhere else. They're absolutely talking rubbish. Guinness in Dublin, there's just something about it. It tastes unbelievable. Even you go to a restaurant, you go to a nice restaurant, and you think you're sitting down, and there it is, Guinness on draft everywhere.
Do you drink anything else other than Guinness?
Oh, no, not Guinness.
You just drink Guinness?
Oh, I love it.
Drink Guinness in Spain?
So a year ago, I couldn't stand it. And then all of a sudden, I went to Dublin, and I tasted it for the first time and can't get enough of it.
So do you drink it in Spain?
All the time.
Well, so you won't have like a IPA or something a bit more refreshing?
That's too posh, that. No, Guinness.
But Guinness is like, I always think Guinness is like a winter drink, like a winter drink, like a Sunday afternoon in the local winter drink after you've had your lunch. I wouldn't drink it in July in Spain.
I love it. I'd have it before lunch, during lunch, after lunch, before bed, after bed.
Wine?
Wine. So on occasions.
Right. Interesting.
But no,
I did wonder today who would be in a worse condition because I've just had 3 days in Ibiza and I knew that Mark had a few days in Dublin and I thought, well, it's going to be a pretty close run thing for who's the most broken, but I think listening to me, it might be me.
Your voice, yeah.
You're looking fly, by the way, on your Instagram Ibiza shots. By the way, there's a bit of modelling gone on there.
Did you have your slippers on? I'm
not going to say.
Did you not see slippers?
Oh, I did see his slippers. Actually, his espadrilles.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say who he was out there for, but because other makes of motor vehicle are available, but check it out.
I will say I was out with Rolls Royce. You
said it.
I was one of the best experiences of my life. You know, I remember Mr. Mark Clattenburg in the first episode talked about escaping Old Trafford in a Porsche, and I've been waiting for the right chance to kind of we call it 11 Tenerife in Scotland, one better than Tenerife.
Yeah.
So I'm going to 11 Tenerife you with your Porsche, and I've been driving Rolls Royces around. But what an amazing experience it was. But it did make me think, Ian, when you first started off in newspapers, did you get company cars in the glory days of the Stoke Sentinel when you were selling 100,000 papers a night?
No, we had pool cars.
Pool cars,
is that what,
yes.
Pool cars. So a pool car, when you work when I worked in Stoke and when I worked on an Nottingham Post. So yeah, you'd if you had to go out on a job, you'd go out into the garage of the newspaper office and say, are there any cars? and they'd give you a card, and it'd just be like a little Fiesta or something with the door handle hanging off, and you kind of go off to the job in the pool car with and depending who'd been in it before, it might be a packet of cigarettes on the back seat or fish and chip wrappers or whatever.
Classic.
Not dissimilar to my car now.
I was the same because I started at DC Thompson in Dundee, and I think I only got the job because I had a driving licence. And I remember getting sent on my first job, and I think it was a Vauxhall Astra, and I crashed it in the multi-storey car park in Dundee. And I couldn't bring myself to tell the chief reporter that I'd crashed it, so I kept it quiet. And then the girl that was working with me, who went out next, came back, and I was like, "Did you see you've got a big bump in the door there? Did you do that?" And she got the blame for it.
She got sacked the next day.
Poor girl.
For it was me that did it. Anyway, happy
now she
days.
knows.
Yeah, it's all revealed.
Yeah, boys, I was going to start as well with a little conversation because a friend of the podcast and a friend of Ian Ladyman's, Andy Dillon, had tipped us off about innovation in football that he thought we might want to talk about before we get started, because having Chelsea getting back to the UK after their little exploits in the Club World Championships, came back, and he said that he noticed when he was at the game the other day that they've now put dry ice cannons in the tunnel. And he said, surely that's a conversation about innovation for innovation's sake. Does it really improve the game? Especially when you walk out in the dry ice and get pumped by Brighton afterwards. It does make you look a little bit silly. But Ian, do you remember, and Mark, same for you, moments where the game had changed? So for me, it would probably be when Sky Sports first got the contract and there were cheerleaders at the start of the game. Yeah. And you thought, hold on, this is a bit different to what I'm used to. Any of those moments, Ian, that stood out for you?
I did an interview, with Jeff Shreves, obviously Sky's pretty well-known touchline reporter. He's not working for Sky anymore. He's not done the job for a couple of years, but Jeff was obviously, the man with the microphone on for all the big games for years and years. And he was there, and he's a great guy, Jeff, a real kind of journalist. He's not just a guy with a microphone. He knows people. He's got contacts, etc. And he was with Sky at the start, and he was talking to me about all of that when they first got the contract, and he told me about the dancing girls and also the fireworks that they used to do before the game, and it was all the pyrotechnics that you see now at Stamford Bridge, given that you've mentioned it, places like that, Old Trafford, they're all done expertly and by kind of outside companies. These were literally done by the runner or the producers make these fireworks. And he said one of the early days, it might have been at QPR, he said we set these fireworks off before the game, and we thought, oh, that's absolutely brilliant, that's worked fabulously, until some old lady turned up and knocked on the front door at Loftus Road the morning after, claiming that one of the fireworks had landed in her garden and killed her dog. Giving a dog a heart attack. Absolutely. Obviously, which couldn't be proved that there was a connection, but chances is that there was. And they said that was it. We immediately had to start rowing back and all of that stuff because we realised that we couldn't control it.
Yeah. Mark, because I was thinking about you, the first time you had to wear the armband technology when your linesman would tell you about a decision. No, that must have been a bit weird.
It was, but I tell you what, the weirdest one was when we first got to use the spray.
Oh, I love the spray.
Oh, I hated it.
It's a great invention, the spray.
It was, but it was horrible at first because everybody used to, the crowds used to get up for it, and you would try and spray it, and sometimes the cans wouldn't work. The early ones, half of them in the batch wouldn't work, so you would go to spray and nothing came out, and then the crowd would start laughing, and every time you pulled it out the crowd would go up. And I remember there was times when you would spray players' boots with a white foam, and they would go off it and it would come out like a blob, and it was just like a great invention which is needed because now you very rarely see a player getting cautioned for encroachment. So it was a great invention, but it was one of them where it was ridiculed and all the crowd laughed at it. But it was such a great tool for referees to have.
Do you ever I do sometimes think that referees carry so much kit around with them now.
It's ridiculous.
In the pockets. Do you ever get confused, or did you ever get confused as to where everything was?
It was incredible.
Pull out the wrong card or...
No, it wasn't the cards, but you had Polar. So you had your Polar heart monitor because they wanted to track your data during the matches. You had your watches. You had your goal line technology. You had a buzzer for your flags. Then you had the microphone for the audio for the assistant referees. And you're thinking, then you had your spare whistles. You had your cards.
Your pen. Yeah.
And you're like, how much stuff did you actually have?
I mean, I would be hopeless. I mean, I am one of those who leaves the house. My missus always jokes that it's pointless me saying goodbye when I leave the house because she knows I'll be back 30 seconds later, having to pick up my phone or my keys or my wallet. I'm just one of those people. I'm always like, right, leave the house, phone, keys, and there's always one of them. I haven't got. Final one, Gordon. I do remember the day. God, it's so long ago now. So now, obviously, we're used to holding up the numbers for how much time's added on at the end. But of course, that used to be just in the referee's head. Didn't it? 20 years ago, whatever. And I remember covering a game at the City Ground at Nottingham Forest for a local paper the first day that was introduced. And when the fourth official held up a board after 45 minutes with 1 on it, I thought Forest were taking the goalkeeper off.
Well, you thought it was a substitution?
Yeah. I thought they were taking Dave Besant off.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
You know them electric subboards? You know, now the game's changed so much. It used to be 1 to 11, didn't it? 12, 13, 14, 15. Now when you get somebody like 77 or 88 and then you go to press the memory button and it doesn't work and you're like, fuck's it, I've got to put that fucking in again, you know what I mean? You're like...
I mean, it's a bit of a boring question, but please let me ask it because I'm interested. But how much training do you get, Mark, when that new innovation comes in for you as a referee, particularly with things like headsets and all the technology? I mean, even did they give you a tutorial on how to spray the...
Yeah, they did actually. We did. We actually met up at St George's and we actually might have been somewhere else, one of the training camps, and we all got the spray and we all started practicing how to make the spray, how long the line, how thick.
You got the one with the whipped cream in it.
Oh, I got it. Yeah. So we did have practice, but then when it came to match days, it always came out wrong.
It is one of my bugbears actually. Walls not being back 10 yards for free kicks. I think it should be done scientifically because I look at.
Well, it can be, you know.
I often look at it and think they're just not 10 yards.
Yeah, but
I find the closer the free kick is to the edge of the box.
Yeah.
So you've got to really get the wall back. The less chance there is of the wall really being back 10 yards.
Yeah, but you've also got if you look at the pitches now, especially at the highest level, the grasses are cut a certain width.
And you know that, do you?
Everybody knows, yeah.
Right.
So the players don't want to know it. They know it, but they don't want to know it because you're right, they want to come in. But all I did, and it was the easiest thing in the world when you had that spray, I didn't ask the wall to go back. I used to just mark the ball, go and mark what I thought was 9.15. And by the way, when you mark 9.15, it's never to the precise because when you make them steps, you always seem to be smaller. But 9.15 is quite a way, you know.
It's a huge 9.15. When you really 10.
Because we used to practice it in training.
10.
No, but we used to practice it in training, and you would go 9.15 meters because it's 10 yards.
Oh, right, meters.
So you would go back to 9.15, and we, as referees, would mark it as practice. Then we would measure it with a tape measure, and there was very rare referee would get it right. It would always be short.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, Gord, don't you think it makes me laugh when you see referees pace it out? You see a referee, and you think, well, hang on a minute. If Mark Clattenburg's pacing it out and Mike Dean is pacing it out, it's going to be different because you're about a foot taller.
I can't remember which. Talking about that, I remember a player, and I can't remember which game it was. And a player was giving us abuse because he thought it wasn't 10 yards with 9.15 meters. And I says, it is. He went, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. So guess what I did? I fucking plonked the ball down like in anger and I just jumped 9.15, so it was actually probably 12 yards, and I went, saves you fucking right for questioning me judgment, you know what I mean?
Thing is, in terms of technology, there is an easy way. You can do it with your iPhone now, right? So I don't know if you've ever used it, but on camera you can measure the distance. So surely if you've got a spray for marking the point, it's easy enough to get an infrared laser or whatever it is to zip out exactly 9.15.
Well, I agree, but then you'd also have to then spray it. Because the spray stops the encroachment, doesn't it? That's what the spray does.
We could have a business here.
It stops the encroachment.
We could set a business up here.
Well, having watched Mark Clattenburg try and build a wall last week, I wouldn't trust him.
No comment.
Technology.
Come have a laser level for that.
Just get the bricks the right way around. Fucking Vigar saying pet disaster.
Yeah, go on. We won't dive into that. We'll save that for another time. Marking is upside down. It
doesn't matter as long as the brick at the top is the right way around. It doesn't matter.
Marking is upside down bricks.
Don't worry. It's still there. It's still up.
Now, from bricks to stones. How about that, lads?
Oh, that's very good.
Thank you.
That's why he gets paid more than us, Mark. sorry. I should start that again. That's why he gets paid more than you. I, of course, don't get paid at all.
For sitting there. Part of your contracting.
It's just a story I'm going to share because I absolutely love it, right? My wee pal Martin Compston, the actor, he made a film called Piggy, and it was a brilliant wind-up. He was making the film with a guy called Paul Anderson, who you'll know as Arthur Shelby, right?
Yeah.
So they were making this brilliant actors, by the way, and they sat down at the canteen and Martin was laughing because every day the catering on this film was the same. You'd either get lasagna or vegetable lasagna, chili or vegetable chili. And after about 2 weeks of this on set, they were all sat around, the actors, and Martin went, I just cannot believe this is the kind of food I get served, and I'm on £80,000 for this film. Got up and walked out. And of course, he wasn't on that kind of money at all. But in half an hour, his agents phoned up and said, how much did you say you're earning?
I love it.
I love a little work wind up like that. It's class. Right, boys, we're going to talk about John Stones because it's a story that really turned my head because there was some honesty and some candour in some of his words this week. As we know, England play Wales today. John Stones back in the England team. It's the first time he's been in the squad for a year, but pretty brutal that road back to recovery because I think he had hamstring problems. He had a real foot issue as well. He admitted, which I thought was an incredible thing for a current serving player, that he considered retiring through injury last season. Now, he said he'd had enough of being so professional and still breaking down. Back in for City, but there's an argument that he's not quite the same player he once was based on what we've seen recently. So let's start by talking about that John Stones situation, then a little bit about mental health in modern football, because Ian, I was trying to think of other players who might have done this, and Michael Owen, when his career finished, really did open up on just how badly broken his body was, and actually he was kind of signing contracts and getting through medicals when perhaps his body wasn't in a place for it. So what was your reaction when you heard John Stones talking about this?
Yeah, I think what we need to realise first and foremost is that there aren't many professional footballers out there who play regularly, free of pain. They're all, and you ask them and they'll tell you, they're all, to a degree, got something going on, simply because of the nature of the game and the workload and the number of games that they play. There's always a niggle, there's always an ache and a pain. It's just the way that it is. And I do think that chronic injury, and I mean proper injury, players who just can't get fit, players who miss weeks and months of seasons and then get fit and then it happens again. I think that is probably the greatest strain for any professional footballer. It's the greatest professional curse for any professional footballer, because you can say what you like about them, how much they earn, their lifestyle. Fundamentally, they all want to play. They all want to play. Danny Mills famously once said, former Man City and England fullback, famously once said he didn't really like playing football. He just liked the lifestyle of a footballer. He's in the minority of about 0.1%, I would say. Yeah. They all want to play. And when they can't, it absolutely ruins them. And John Stones has been there. So these quotes came from, before every England international, every England meet-up, they do what's called a Players' Media Day at St George's Park, and all the players go and sit down and talk to the written press and the broadcast media, etc. I wasn't there on Monday, but I often am. And this was the context in which Stones kind of unburdened himself. What do we know about John Stones? Marvellous player,
great player.
A real nuts and bolts defender when he came through at Barnsley and then Everton, and then of course got his big move to City. And then we know what happened at City. You know, Pep got hold of him and turned him into the John Stones that we know now, which is kind of French. You know, it's not an exaggeration, like a Franz Beckenbauer, Alan Hansen type of footballer who could play in midfield as easily as he does at the back. But he's been massively impeded by injuries and muscle injuries. Am I surprised to hear him say what he said? No, I'm not surprised, because I think a lot of players go through it. It's just that not many of them choose to talk about it while they're still playing.
Just to say, 11 Premier League appearances last campaign, and the quote he said, I didn't want to do it. I'd had enough of being so professional and trying to do everything right in my power to then keep breaking down and not having the answers. It was a very difficult place to be in. And I think that's the question, isn't it? It's like, I'm sure the medical staff on hand are some of the best in the world, but have you started to see, or have you noticed any kind of mental health professionals working with clubs. There's a lot of talk of sports psychologists, but it doesn't really seem to be about mental health. It's more about the aspects of winning and competing, isn't it, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, look, mental health and kind of mental training. Because when we say mental health, we immediately think about problems, and football clubs are becoming much better at spotting issues, dealing with issues, helping players. But when I say mental training, I'm also talking about the type of mental support that you get to enable you to be a better athlete and to enable you to perform at a better level. And without a doubt, all of that would have been available to John Stones. Somebody said to me last season when City were kind of falling off a cliff, and somebody said to me, it was an agent actually, said that he'd been to speak to somebody at City, and there were 12 players that they were prepared to let go during the summer. Not all of them, because they wouldn't have had anybody left, but there was a group of 12 that they would listen to, and Stones was on the list. And I remember saying to somebody around City, said, blimey, I'm told Stones is on this list. And they were like, well, yeah, but it's never fit. It's John Stones. It's John Stones. We know what John Stones is, but he's never ever fit. So, firstly, I'm delighted that he's that he's playing. Secondly, to your point, Gordon, very briefly, I was at did a thing with Brentford Football Club on Tuesday in London. They take the mental health of their players very, very seriously, and they work closely with a psychologist by the name of Michael Caulfield, who people may well have heard of. He's worked with Gareth Southgate. He's worked with quite a lot of clubs around the country, but he's now Brentford's psychologist, and he has it's a very, very simple concept at Brentford. It's called Michael's, and I've written a piece about this. It'll appear on Mail Online on Friday, I think. It's called Michael's Bench, and that's what it is. It's a bench, and it's a bench round the corner of a building at the Brentford training ground, and Michael sits on it to talk to players. And the concept is that if you just want to talk, if you're worried about your form, or you're worried about something with your family, or you're worried about your health or whatever, or you're worried about the fact you can't get in the team, you don't want to talk to somebody with a club badge on. You don't want to tell the manager your worries, because he might think, might not want to pick him. You've got Michael's bench, and Michael's there 3 or 4 days a week, and he said there's not a single player in that squad who at some point hasn't gone to sit on that bench with him, just to have a conversation. And when I met Michael on Tuesday, he brought the Brentford player Fabio Carvalho with him, former Liverpool player, now at Brentford, Portuguese lad, lovely lad. And he said he's used it endlessly. He said, because I know that I can just sit there and just talk. Whatever's worrying me, whatever's on my mind, I can just talk to Michael about it. And Michael refers to himself as a dustbin. He says, I'm a dustbin for all the players' problems, because once we're in my dustbin, the lid will never get taken off that dustbin. In other words, no one, the first team manager will never know, teammates will never know, the chairman will never know, the supporters will never know. But if it helps the player, then we're all good.
Yeah, Mark, what about you? I mean, the levels of abuse that referees get, you're probably up there with estate agents, lawyers, parking attendants, maybe dentists. It's an unpopular profession because you get the blame for everything, right? So what mechanisms were there in place for you to deal with that kind of pressure?
At first, when I first got on the Premier League as a referee in 2004, there was zero. That was never talked about. We didn't really, at that point, get subject to a lot of abuse, because the abuse would only be to your face, because newspapers didn't give you any abuse. Yes, they would write about your performance, positively or negatively, but they never talked about you as a person. It's only now, over the last years, where social media has become such a huge topic, where people can have the right to say whatever they want via the social media platforms, and the abuse that you can take regarding your performances. You could
handle being screamed at in the stadium. You could deal with that. Yeah,
inside the stadium, yes, but when it gets outside of the stadium, that's when it becomes really, really difficult. When your family get abused, I remember the story when I had to tell me postman to stop delivering me mail with just my name on. They think they were doing me a favour by just Mark Clattenburg with no address. And Royal Mail think, yeah, I know where he lives. I'll drop that packaging into them, and it was just lots of abuse. And you just, that was the levels, you know, mobile phones, everything now. And I know PG and Well are doing a lot of work behind, they've got the sports psychologists, but it's interesting what Ian said. A lot of the sports psychologists is actually for the on-the-field stuff. They don't look at the off-the-field stuff, what a person goes through and how the abuse can affect. It used to affect me a lot. And people would say, well, you're not refereeing very well. Why? And you're like a player sometimes, you form dips. And it doesn't matter how hard you try and referee, how hard you try and run the following game, you miss a penalty again and you're thinking, what's going wrong? And the abuse you would take.
How did it affect you, Mark?
I hated, like, for example, I would go home and I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't speak on a Sunday. So if I refereed on a Saturday and I'd had an indifferent performance, or I knew I could have refereed the game or certain decisions better, I would be a nightmare on a Sunday. I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't be a nice person. And then on a Monday, I would switch again, and then I would prepare for the next game. So it was like riding a bike and then falling off and getting back on it again. But everybody says, and it doesn't matter what you are as a human being, you say, well, I'm not going to look at social media. But you're a human being and you want to look at it. You want to find one positive. You want to find somebody to say, actually, you had a good game, but you don't. And then you read the abuse. And like, for example, even me just doing this podcast, the abuse I take for just doing a podcast, for having a speaking part or to express my feelings or express what I think, nobody wants that anymore. I don't think a person outside wants to hear somebody else's opinion. And that's a sad where we are. And as human beings, and I get where John Stones is coming from, when you're in dark moments, it's like, how do you get out of it? You feel that the world's against you. And, you know, it's probably my saving grace was the people around us. My family, my friends were the ones that could spot how I was going quiet. I was distancing myself. I wouldn't answer my mobile phone. I wouldn't get out of bed. And they got us back into a normal place again, but then it was a revolving circle. The following week, the next week. It was only at the end of the season where you could actually have that window of opportunity before pre-season again, where you had that release. Yeah. And that was going through the season, you just went through the season the best you could.
And this is that's really, really interesting insight. And this is one of the reasons why I do think, I've said it before, that there's too much analysis of referees' performance now, which is why I think that things like the Howard Webb Sky programme that he does with Michael Owen, for example, which is all driven by this desire to have transparency, etc., doesn't help referees. It doesn't help because what it does is the type of torture that you're describing that may follow an indifferent performance is just being drawn out by this endless scrutiny of decisions. Yeah. And that's why I think, one of the many reasons why I think once a game is done, once a refereeing performance is done, you just put it to bed and you move on to the next one.
But it's strange, Ian, because even if I look back 10 years ago, I remember refereeing and you would give your best performance, of course you did. Yeah, there may be decisions that were subjective. Some people would say, yes, it is a penalty. Some would say it's not. And that's where it did end then. Yeah. But because, and it's not just the media that's brought this, it's just society's changed it. Nobody wants to listen to somebody else's opinion. They only want to say their side of the argument. And if they think it's a penalty, it doesn't matter what you say to try and justify it, they'll always stay with their...
I was going to say, lads, it's a really good point, that, Mark. I did a bit of work about 9 years ago with the Welsh Rugby Union, because the players in that particular squad were having a rough ride with the media, and they're like, come in, wear the kit and just blend in and observe what happens. And it was fascinating, right? Because everything about their performance was measured, right? You get up in the morning and they'd have to stand in front of an iPad. They were weighed. They'd talk about how they slept, what they dreamt about, when they went to the toilet. I mean, it was incredible the level of detail that they were analysed on. But one of the things that they'd shown in the graph of performance was this dip every now and again. And the dip was when they were given their mobile phones. Because some of the boys, without naming names, had Google alerts for themselves to see what was being written and said about them. And one player in particular was so crippled by a critic, one person who was talking about him, that it was really affecting his mental health, his performance, all of the rest of it. So I spent a bit of time with him going through it, right? And here's a guy who could... I won't go into details because it will give you the player and if I talk too much about it. So he could do amazing things on the pitch, but he was crippled by this one person who was saying stuff about him in every game he played. You know, you could play in front of 80,000 people, but he was bothered by... So anyway, through social media, I could find a bit of detail about this guy. And it was somebody living in an annex flat, working as a mechanic in his dad's company in a tiny little village in the valleys in Wales. I was like, you're letting this... Here, look, this is the guy that's winding you up. You're bothered about his opinion. But I can see you playing regularly with some of the best players and against some of the best players in the world. But this is getting to you. And you could see the penny dropping, like, really? Actually, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't be bothered about that. And I'm like, what are you even looking at it for? You know, why do you care about feedback from this person when you're delivering the goods here, here and here? But it showed you how crippled they were by almost tuning in specifically to every word that was said about them. And whether that came from ego or narcissism or whatever it was, if you ignore it and you don't pay attention to it, it does make a difference.
The culture of the dressing room, whether it be football dressing room or the referee's dressing room, we like to tell ourselves that it's changed and that it's a more forgiving and a more inclusive place. I'm not convinced that it is. I think it's changed to a degree, but I think there's a lot of work to be done there in terms of, and I asked Fabio Carvalho this at Brentford yesterday, I said to him, do you still think genuinely that in a football dressing room we have now cut through that macho culture where everyone's got to be an alpha male, to talk about the men's game? Do you think we've cut through that and we are now at a point where everybody can fully be themselves in that environment? And of course he said no. They haven't. We're not at that point. We are not at that point. And I think that when it comes to abuse, the stuff you talk about, Gordon, is fascinating about the social media stuff, the phone stuff, what you talk about, Mark. And it's fundamental to, I think, the way that footballers can perform these days. And that's why you need that dressing room culture to support you. And that's why a lot of the winning teams are the ones who haven't just got the best players, but they've got the best culture.
And that's so important that you mention that, Ian, because I thought the quotes from Stephen Gerrard on the Rio Ferdinand Presents podcast were really telling, because it sounded like an unhappy time for him in the England camp. Compare that to John Stones, by the way, who, despite being injured, was invited, wasn't he, by Tuchel to be part of the squad, which he grabbed that opportunity and wanted to be a part of it. But just the Gerrard quotes, right? He said, I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. I hated the hotel rooms. In my early days, I'd have days where I was down, like low down. I'm in this room for 7 hours. What am I going to do? I didn't feel part of a team. I didn't feel connected with my teammates with England. I didn't feel it with Liverpool. They were like the best days of my life. I felt like the staff looked over me, like I felt special. I felt I couldn't wait to get there. With England, I just wanted the games and the training sessions and then to be away. I mean, Ian, that's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot said about the golden generation not delivering the goods, but if that was Stephen Gerrard's experience, you'd imagine it was pretty similar for quite a lot of the boys, wherever they came from in the country to play for England.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot in those statements from Stephen that are sweeping. I'm absolutely sure that Stephen Gerrard, a number of caps that he got, did not feel like that every single time he turned up for England. He can't have done. It would just been unremittingly miserable if it was. And there must have been better times. However, he does talk to a period that we know about when, and you go back through Sven and Capello in particular. Where players I remember other players talking about how they couldn't wait to get away from camp when they were with Capello, because it was just like being with the Sergeant Major. But I think there was at that time when we had a lot of talented England players, a lot of whom came from the big clubs, Liverpool, Manchester United, for example, and they didn't gel. And we know about it. They sat at different tables. I remember Gary Neville. I did an interview with Gary Neville 2-3 years ago, and he spoke not specifically about that, but he talked about the media when he was playing for England. He said when he first came through playing for England as a young player, he said, and this is a direct quote, he said, I found the written media terrifying. Now he's talking about a time in our trade when there were some pretty big beasts knocking about with big egos and big personalities in a way that maybe we don't have anymore. The landscape from that point of view has changed. But that was just, Gary Neville, a strong guy, right? A strong guy. We know what, the chat that's been around Gary and some of the opinions that he's felt confident enough to express this week about the country. Whether you agree with those or not, that gives you an insight into the type of bloke that Gary is and the confidence that he has in his own worth, in his own opinions. He said that England stripped that away from him, and it's taken work. It's taken work from initially Gareth Southgate and behind the scenes at the FA, and now being carried on hopefully by Thomas Tuchel, to strip an awful lot of that toxicity away from joining up to play for England.
Here's a little, just as an aside, and I'd love Ian if you ever got the chance to ask him about it. There's a great story I was told about Wayne Rooney under the Capello era, because they were locked up in the rooms, as Gerrard, I think he was referring to the Capello era. They're locked up in the rooms, they weren't allowed to socialise and stuff. But the word I heard was that Wayne Rooney used to sit on a laptop and do internet gambling. And apparently he'd fallen asleep on his laptop and woke up and he'd won £250,000. And if I fell asleep playing roulette,
I'd be happy.
I'd have lost my house. But if somebody, I know he's got his own podcast now, but I'd love to hear his version of that story now, because, that's pretty jammy, that, isn't it?
And
Anyway.
I think it's, and it points to a great story, and it does point to an issue about, when England goes to the World Cup next summer, they'll be away for, well, depending how long they stay in the tournament. If they go deep into the tournament, in terms of the way that the preparation time they'll have before the tournament starts, they'll be away for 6 or 7 weeks. And again, in that time, you'll play a handful of games and you'll train and you'll spend a lot of time.
I know what it's like on tournaments.
Huh?
I know what it's like on tournaments.
Of course you do, mate. Of course you do.
It's the hardest thing. And it's the hardest thing because it's a routine. You get up, you have your breakfast, you'll train, and then you've got this lull during the day of boredom. And boredom can do a lot of things. It affects your mind, your mentality. It's people say, they get a lot of money, football players, but this period of a tournament, and if you're not a part of the 11, I was lucky, I was refereeing some games in the tournament, but if you're not a part and you're like on the peripheral, it must be really, really difficult having to do the same things every day and not being playing games.
Do you know who I think has the hardest job in a football squad at a major tournament? The third choice goalkeeper. He is the one bloke out of all of them who thinks, I'm not playing here. I'm going to spend 7 weeks away from my family and I ain't playing.
We know now that we're in partnership with Wix Trade Pro. Now, we all know the real pros want to spend as much time on the job as possible rather than kicking around in store, don't they?
Exactly. And with Wix Trade Pro, you save 10% every time you shop in store or online. No minimum spend. That's like a guaranteed 3 points every week.
Vigar's checked it and it's true.
Right, and here's the real time saver. Wix Click and Collect, order online, you head straight to collect in store, grab what you need, and you're back on site before half-time. How about that?
Which allows you more time to get the job done.
Download the Wix Trade Pro app today, sign up, simple as that.
Terms and conditions apply.
Right, boys, last week we did the Daily Mail Predictor for the first time. Ian took the test, the online game, with big prizes available. He had to predict the result in 7 weekly games. So, Ian, do you remember how you did with this one? Have you got any recollection?
Yeah, I was actually, this is why I don't do fancy football. One of the many reasons I don't do fancy football. One of the main reasons is because I'm a grown-up and not a child. But it's because I don't want football to take over my life any more than it did. But as I was going to Old Trafford on Saturday for the United game, I was listening to the Tottenham Leeds game thinking, I back this is a draw. I tip this is a draw. I need this to be a draw. And of course it wasn't a draw. I don't need that in my life, guys. I just don't need it in my life.
Yeah, Leeds United Spurs, you said draw. That's right. So that was Spurs 1-2-1, didn't they? Arsenal West Ham, you said Arsenal win. So that was correct. Good going, 2-0. Man United Sunderland, you said Man United win. Correct. I got that wrong.
You laughed at me. You laughed at me for
that. Laughed at you. It was a 2-0 win, of course, for Man United.
An easy 2-0.
Chelsea. I mean, again, this was a coupon buster. Chelsea, Liverpool, I think. You said a draw, and it was wrong. Chelsea won 2-1.
Late goal.
And again,
late goal.
I think most people would have probably agreed with you on the Everton Palace prediction. You said a draw.
Everton, another late goal.
It was a late goal, and to tell you
forgotten
what,
about
Jack.
Jack Grealish, Palace battered them in the first half as well. I mean, whatever David Moyes said to them at half time was unreal. Newcastle United, Nottingham Forest, you said Newcastle win, correct, 2-0. And Brentford Man City, you said Man City win, correct, a 1-0 away win. So that was 4 out of 7.
So if you take added time out of that, I've actually got 6 out of 7. Added time has killed me in 2 of those games.
Right, Russell Martin disappeared, didn't he? It's been a dramatic week at Ibrox, to say the least, and there have been a few dramatic weeks over the years at Ibrox. The Chiefs there, Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Mahathi, have admitted they got it wrong, parting ways with Russell Martin. 123 days in charge, that's the shortest reign of any manager in the club's history. A 1-1 draw at Falkirk. I don't know if you saw any of the footage afterwards, but it was something pretty sad and pretty bleak about a man kind of trying to escape with a police escort from Falkirk. Really bleak, really bleak to see. And Ian, look, I know you've been in a position where a manager's left and you need to get some words for the next edition, right? But can you remember a situation where a manager left a ground in dramatic circumstances like that, hounded by his own fans, chased by the press, difficult conversations with his own board? There's something pretty bleak about that. Have you been involved in one like that before?
Trying to think. I mean, these days, because managers do tend to stay around and do so much blooming media and stuff afterwards, I've certainly seen managers in states of disrepair after games, especially when I was back on local papers. I remember covering Forest when Dave Bassett was manager, and they were in a bad way and they were going down. He was clearly going to lose his job, and I saw him in a couple of pretty bad situations after games. I remember once being in slightly more comedic answer than he would have expected, but I'll tell the story anyway. I remember once being in, I was covering Notts County when the late, great Colin Murphy was manager. For those of you who don't know who Murph was, he's a very eccentric manager, low division manager of Lincoln, Notts County, Scunthorpe, other places. Anyway, I remember being in Murph's office after they'd lost a game at home, and I went in there to see him, and he was getting changed out of, let me get this right, he was getting changed out of his tracksuit that he'd worn for the game into a suit to go up to the boardroom, right? And I was in his office because I was the only media there. So he said, you might as well come in and do it in here, Ian. And I was standing in front of him while he got changed, and he got out of his tracksuit and into his suit, and so he was standing there in his pants and his socks, and he put his shirt on first, and then he put his tie on, and then he put his jacket on. So all that was left was his shoes and his trousers. And he was so discombobulated by what had just happened, he put his fucking shoes on first. He put his shoes on first, right? And he tries to style it out, and I'm then watching him trying to get his trouser leg over his shoes. And of course, I start to smirk, and he just looked up at me. And he looked me in the eye, he said, I can't do the impression. He said, you may laugh, son. He said, but you've got no fucking idea what this job does to you. And so, it's sorry, not the answer you expected, but it can be hard for managers after games, for sure.
I think you've raised an interesting point about the candour of a man there who's suddenly really opened up to you, because I can't think of a time where a manager has misread or misunderstood a way to communicate with fans in a worse fashion than Russell Martin. You've got to know your audience, you've got to know your fan base. And talking in sort of airport management Bible book speak is a disaster. I thought fans just don't buy it, do they, if you're talking the language he was talking, because it did feel like he'd swallowed one of those self-help management books at times. It's
a really fine line for these guys to draw. I know for a fact, because several of them have told me, that the one thing they hate doing more than anything is what they call the flash interviews with the TV companies immediately after the game, because they haven't had time to calm down. Whatever message the club's PR officer wants to get into them before they go and see the written press, haven't had time to do it. And the managers hate it, because that's when they're vulnerable. And there are times when I watch them, particularly on the television at home, like someone like Ange Postecoglou, for example, and you just feel like you're staring right into their soul. You really, really, really do. And some managers do it very, very well, and others do it badly. And the mistake that Russell Martin made, which you allude to there, Gord, is he thought he could cover it up with gobbledygook. And you can't. You can't kid football fans. You just can't.
Listen, I watched a lot of Rangers, because a lot of my friends are Rangers fans, and I watched a lot of it. And I watched his interviews afterwards, and I just felt he thought that the tide would turn. He thought, because it's Rangers, we're going to win some games, and I think I'm going to get out of trouble here. Mm-hmm. But it was week in, week out. And what was interesting, it's similar to what's happening in Nottingham Forest as well. Once you lose the fans, once you've lost the fans, doesn't matter what, even if you get a couple of results, them fans they're always negative. Rangers fans were always negative about this appointment. From for whatever, even before they'd even kicked the ball, they were on a negative. And that's so difficult when you're going into a place, and forget about like we can talk about his Southampton days. People say he failed in the Premier League. Southampton didn't really give it a go. If they got promoted, but they didn't really give it a go in the Premier League. So he gets the sack, of course. Southampton still did they go through 2 managers that season and still went down. So it didn't matter who tried to save that club. If it was Russell Martin or Jose Mourinho, they would have still went down. But for whatever reason, and I don't know what Rangers fans wanted, but it wasn't a sexy name. So
I know what they wanted. I know what they wanted, Omar, because and this is where the leadership of the club have got it horribly wrong. To manage at Ibrox, you have to be a formidable, hard human being. Graham Souness, Walter Smith, Dick Advocat, they were all successful because there was no question about who was in charge, who was the boss, the language, the way they handled press conferences. That's how it worked. Yeah. So I don't see where that decision-making happened. I mean, you've been at Forest on the board. You know how these conversations happen. How did that not come up?
Of course it does, but what I dislike in clubs, and Rangers have done the same thing. Bronkhurst, for example, he comes in, nice guy. I met him in China when he was managing in China. Very respectful guy. The performances were good. They win a trophy. He gets them to the final of the was it the Europa League? It would have been the Europa League. So he gets to a final of the Europa League, and the nearly end up winning the trophy, which was a big step up for Rangers. And then the following season he gets sacked, and they go backwards again instead of going forwards. They seem to want to go 2 steps forward, 3 back. They never seem to want to build something in Rangers.
It's undoubtedly an incredibly difficult job, and we know why that is. Celtic have such a leap on them at the moment because Celtic keep qualifying for the Champions League, or they had been, and getting the money that comes with it, and Rangers can't do it, and then the financial gap is significant from that point of view, and that handicaps them. So we know that. But to the point of the way you handle yourself after a game, no matter what you say, no words will ever totally make up for bad results. We know that, but they can make it worse. And that was Russell Martin's problem, is that he had bad results and he was making it worse by what he said and how he said it. I know it's, for example, one of the things that is winding Forest fans up at the moment is the type of things that Postecoglou keeps saying after games: no particular accountability, not offering any reassurances, appearing as though he's under siege, appearing as though the world is against him. I know for a fact, I spend my life listening to football managers talk, okay, but the way I always think about it, when I think about this, is the way I look at my rugby team. When I look at Wigan, when I watch Wigan Warriors play, win, lose, or, well, you don't draw in rugby league, but win or lose, right? I always want to hear what the coach Matty Peake says, because if we've lost, he can make me feel better by how he explains it afterwards. Yeah. And if we've won, he can make me feel even better by what he says. Yeah. It's important to get the message right. It's important to get the message right. And I'm not sure the last time I heard a coach get the message so catastrophically wrong as Russell Martin's been getting it.
I thought that was really interesting when Brendan Rodgers brought up that team building exercise. And actually, when you've got your opposition manager leaping to your defence to help you out, because he made the point that he'd taken the Celtic players for a team bonding session with their wives, but nobody mentioned it. It didn't leak to the press because Celtic, I mean, they're not in a great position, but the focus is on Rangers. So when you take the boys swimming in Loch Lomond at a working class club like Ibrox, when there's boys on the tools all day grafting and they hear about this little trip for a bit of cold water therapy, they're not going to buy it, and you've got to manage the leak of that information.
Let's see.
Right, boys, let's see what happens there. That's it for the latest episode of Whistleblowers. We'll be back on Tuesday for the next instalment. Remember, you can follow us on socials and you can email us as well, whistleblowers@dailymail.com. Get across to those social accounts. X, it's @BlowersPod, TikTok @WhistleBlowersPodcast, Instagram @WhistleBlowersPod. Mark, have you remembered to bring your whistle?
It's in Temple Bar in Dublin. I left it on the bar yesterday.
Did you take it out with you on a night out?
No, yeah. Blow the whistle on people.
You know, I'd love
When
that.
somebody gives us a... So it was an Everton... I'll just talk about a whistle. So an Everton fan used to... After I had a nightmare when I refereed the derby one year, Everton-Liverpool. I had an absolute nightmare, and the abuse I was taking and the death threat. And this guy got me home number. We didn't have mobile phones at the time, and he got me home number, and he used to ring us every Saturday night, early hours of Sunday morning, every week. And I got sick. I got absolutely sick because he used to wake us up. So one day, I got me whistle, and I absolutely blew it as hard as I could down the phone. Guess what? He never rang us again.
No wonder you and Howard Webb don't talk to each other anymore.
Exactly. So do you want me to blow me? Am I going to blow me full-time whistle?
Go for it. Thank you very much for watching Whistleblowers. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember, episodes every Thursday and Tuesday, and on a Sunday, you'll get our clip of the week.